Welcome to the Authentically You podcast. I am so glad to be back once again. We've revamped this whole podcast and show, so it's just fun being on video. You guys getting to see the faces of some amazing people I'm getting to interview out there. And I'm really excited today. I got connected with Dr. Karim Samuel through another podcast. And, not even knowing anything about her, we met and then I started talking. And of course, I do a ton of stuff with veterans. And so Dr. Kamen, she began her career as the U.S. Navy's first female African American helicopter pilot, which is amazing. And she was there for 9 years. And when you have amazing people doing amazing things, she just went on. And after she retired from the military, she went on to get a PhD in positive neuropsychology, 3 masters in information systems, spiritual psychology, and spiritual science. And she's a best-selling author along with a philanthropist. So I'm really excited to talk with her today. Cameron, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Julie. It's so nice to be here. And I apologize. I forgot to say it's Camino, like El Camino.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Camille,
That's
excuse
okay.
me.
I'm so
Uh,
used to it.
Ducharme, everyone gets it wrong. And in Nashville, my favorite mispronounces is they said Ducharon. And I didn't even correct it. I just said, yeah, that's me.
Yeah, I'm used to it. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to call you doctor. Just going to call you
Okay.
doctor. Hello, doctor.
I'm
Doctor.
Yep.
Well, it's so amazing that we met because as we talked about, I met Vernice, who's the first African American female combat pilot. And of course, you and Vernice are going to get to meet on another thing we're doing, which is so cool that this is just all coming full circle. And as you know, we do a lot of work, not only with veterans, but women veterans and empowering and supporting women veterans. And I'm really excited for you to tell your story because you've achieved so much. And I'm sure it wasn't easy. But we were talking, the other day about how this all started for you and you were mentioning to me like they didn't know what to do with me and I wanted to talk about that because I thought that was really interesting of how did you end up going into this pilot program and were you planning to break barriers or is it just kind of something that happened for you?
Oh, Julie, it's such a great question because I really love to say I was the least likely to go into being a Navy pilot. I was, a scared little, 21-year-old when I got there. I was not an athlete. There was no part of me that said I should be doing this. I was not trying to break barriers. I was actually just trying not to quit. That was really all I was trying to do is just don't quit.
That's amazing. Well, what, when you went in, you said, they weren't expecting you and you really kept your head down.
Yeah.
And what was that like as you were going through training? Were you the only woman there as well? Was it just you and all men?
Well, when I went to Pensacola first to go to the aviation officer candidate school, there were other women there, but no other Black females, African American females, had finished the program for 7 years.
Wow.
Brenda Robinson was the very first one, and that was 7 years before me. And most of the women had fallen out, dropped out. And so I all I really did make a promise to myself because I felt like, I was kind of a loosey-goosey kind of teenager in college. And so I really just didn't want to quit. So when I got there, I struggled physically because I wasn't an athlete. I failed every run. I got a lot of chances because I was a Black female, and I know that. But it was really this opportunity. When I got my commission, I was towards the bottom of the class, not at the bottom, but towards the bottom. And I made a promise to myself that I would never be at the bottom again. And so that served me, one promise served me so well when I got up to flight school. And they said, well, when you complete, if you're number one, you get the squadron of your choice.
Wow.
So that's what I meant when I said I kept my head down. I literally I studied all the time. I had never wanted to be a pilot before, it was offered to me second semester, senior year of college. It was, I really just wanted to go into business, and it was an opportunity for me to do that. And when they offered aviation. I was like, I don't know. And so I tried it, ended up doing it, ended up loving it. But yeah, I was scared every day, getting my uh, wings and flying. So when I got to the end of that flight school, I was number one. And I will tell you, I didn't remember this, Julie, but my mother told me because I was number one by a lot. And so there are two helicopter squadrons. They actually moved my date to be with my graduation date to be with the other command where there was a white male graduating. And so that it would, I was just like, okay, whatever. But that happened. And
Wow.
then when I did graduate number one, I did not get the squadron of my choice. I
What?
I requested San Diego. I got Norfolk. I cried for 3 days and kind of called DC, called everybody I knew, and they're like, "Needs of the Navy." And in hindsight, it was the best decision to go to Norfolk. I got great ports out of it and in flying, and so it worked out in my favor, but it felt very unfair at the time.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I appreciate your transparency. A lot of times people think, and it's okay to think that we're indestructible and we were just great and perfect from the beginning and we had no issues. And I always think that's so far from the truth. Being a high level athlete, I remember crying in the shower, fighting my way to the top, being the underdog. And I think those are things that really create these amazing characteristics as you talk about. Obviously, by your bio, you can see that you didn't stop at number one in the Navy. You continued out, and obviously, this served you well. And so, after you served your 9 years, I did want to touch on. I remember you said that when you came out, you didn't do a lot of media. You were very quiet about this, which is interesting to me because obviously, we like to celebrate the barrier breakers. And so, what made you want to be more quiet and not make a big deal out of it?
Well, when I first got my commission, I had um, was doing a lot of press with Tuskegee Airmen. So I
Mhm.
did do a lot of work with them, and it was wonderful to be on stage with them. However, the challenge was that I really wasn't sure of myself. So I didn't want to make a mistake or have the Navy um, disparage me in any way. So
Mm.
I just really wanted to go back and really work on being number one because I was kind of like limping along in the beginning. And so when I came out, it was kind of the same thing. I went 180 out. I kind of went. I was tired of being a boy after 9 years, so I kind of went towards a more of a female business. And I really I put it in a category that was so separate from me. It was like, oh, I was a pilot and I'm now a business owner. And then I failed and I
Mm.
failed miserably. And so then it was the shame and embarrassment of a bankruptcy, two foreclosures, and really having to choose to survive that
Mm.
and move on.
Yeah. And you in hindsight, we always look at these failures, right? And we think, wow, I had to have that fail because it opened up another door. It changed my direction. But man, it does hurt when we have those moments of failure. Um, And, I have a daughter who's almost 14 and we're having these conversations now about everyone doesn't get a prize and failure happens and she's getting to that point in her life where that's going to happen. But you know what? You didn't fail for long because I have down here you transitioned and you're working at a technology media company and you quickly climbed the corporate ladder to become the vice president of global website operations at $1 billion company. How did that happen after this failure?
Well, I took some time to figure out what am I good at. So I had um, a master's in information technology, but I also didn't think that that was worth anything because it had been years before. Again, my self esteem took such a hit when my business failed, and so I had to really think about the things that I love to do. So I love to code web pages at the time. This was a few decades ago and learned HTML. I also had worked for a doctor. I had wanted to get into, I wanted to be a doctor. It's actually, my undergrad was, started as pre-med, didn't make it all the way through and switched to a different major. But that idea of helping people was always in me. And so I learned web pages. I got a great web developer job, and then it was just kind of entry level. And then I set my sights on, like, okay, entry level, I'm pretty good. Let me just keep. And I learned a methodology that I use within myself that I teach other women of how to kind of grow their career. And so I did. And, there were so many different twists and turns to my career in corporate, but everything along the line was me mentoring people. I loved being a people manager. I loved helping people grow. When they'd come to me with issues or problems in their lives, I just would light up. I'm like, yes. And they were like, well, crying or whatever. And I'm like, this is awesome. This is something I can help you with.
They're
So
like, "Why are you so happy about my problems?"
but that also, I like to say, I've been a coach since I was 7, kind of bossing my dad around and telling him that there were things that he needed to do better in his life. And so it was just kind of a natural progression, and that's being able to take care of people was what advanced me.
Awesome. Well, and that's what I think here as I look that you're now a coach and you work with a long line. I mean, there's just so many amazing things here besides being a coach, and you're a keynote speaker and you do workshops, and of course you have your books. So now you're a full-time successful entrepreneur, right?
Yes.
And so what are you doing in this? I know there's a lot of facets to it, but give us a little summary.
Well, Julie, you said something really perfect. It's like in, our breakdowns are the breakthroughs, right? The things that happen to us. So when I failed financially, I knew that I had created that in my mind first, and then had to realize, well, if I could create that, how do I uncreate that? How do I create what I want in my life? And so that's really been my journey and the things that I help people with, how to clear the blocks and beliefs that they grew up with, that they picked up, what's in their subconscious mind. And a lot of the work that I do today is with people, business owners, executives, and I train a lot of coaches and have apprentices that are really, it's how do we see what we want, and there's a veil there
Mm,
that seems to separate us. My job is to go in and help them reframe their past, clear their past, because I'm also a clinical hypnotherapist, to really pull out those beliefs and memories and blocks that hold us back.
mm. I think that's amazing. Well, and you have a PhD in positive neuropsychology, which just means you're very, very smart. And as my friend jokes, you can read our minds, right? Because we understand our minds. She always jokes that with these, she's like, I can read your mind. Um, but it's so interesting because you talk about clearing those blocks, and we were talking the other day about fear and how powerful fear is, and how it can literally just completely stop someone from moving forward in their life or moving forward on something. And someone was asking me in an interview, well, what are the barriers? Who stopped you? And I was like, I can't give you a person's name that stopped me from doing the things I did. I can tell you that it was probably me and my barriers and my mental hangups and the fear that I had, which slowed me down. And I find that so interesting because very rarely do I run into someone who says, well, there's a very specific person that held me down and stopped me from doing it. And so when you have like this, who come, you've got these issues coming in, how do you approach that? Like I come to you and say, hey, God, I'm struggling with fear. How do I get past this? What's something that you would do?
That's such a great question, because the way you said it was is perfect. It's like it's not outside of us. I remember one time someone said, "My mother lives around the corner," and I'm like, "My mother lives in here in my brain."
So
Like,
true.
she's even closer than next, around the corner. And so, and I love my mother, and I grew up in a wonderful family, and at the same time, there are a lot of beliefs that came in, a lot of things. They wanted to protect us. I grew up in an
Mm,
all white area, and they wanted to protect us. So there were things like, don't embarrass us out there. Well, we don't know what that means. Don't
mm,
embarrass us translates into stay in this box. There is some threat out here, and we don't know where it is,
mm,
right? And so it kept me safe in this box of not expanding for a long time until I realized, oh, wait, that was a time when she was trying to protect me. And there was a time that was trying to protect her. She was a principal in the area, so she also didn't want bad children out there. And so it's helping for me when someone comes and says, I'm afraid to do this. I'm like, well, tell me about that fear. Tell me what it's telling you.
mm.
Whose voice is it? And many times it is one of a parent, it could be a school counselor, it could be a church, whatever. And it could be made up as children. A lot of the work I do is with younger selves to help them realize people don't realize they most times have a younger version of themselves that's actually in charge of them.
Hmm.
And,
That's interesting.
and they're the ones who are having the tantrum. So if we can get them to see, oh, this person is an adult now,
Hmm,
they don't know it's there, and usually it's under hypnosis that I do that, but it's really this opportunity for us to realize that something else is running us. What are we afraid of? And
mm,
if we can get our why big enough, and why from this, I must become this. A lot of them want to write a book. I must write a book. Why?
mm,
Why must you? Because I have something that can help another person thrive in their life. And I do not want anybody not to thrive.
mm.
And so that's this opportunity for people to see that there's so much inner work that they can do. And it doesn't have to be hard or worrisome. It just is, we just have to identify what's ours today.
Yeah, yeah, it's kinda like peeling the onion, right?
Yeah.
So and I know some people even will say to me, "I don't wanna peel that onion because 'cause I'm afraid I'm gonna peel back too far," you know? But it makes so much sense. I love how you talk about the younger self because you know how people always say, "If you could go back to your younger self and give them advice." And, when you start thinking about that and you talked about, being this non-athletic, person who was trying that didn't pass every test. And of course, here you are rocking it, becoming number one, you know. Um, I love that because you had to overcome, right? I'm sure you had something inside of you telling you, like, no, no, you can't do this. You're not athletic enough, you're not whatever. And I was just having this conversation with junior high girls at my daughter's volleyball game. And they went into this gym that was a really strange setup and there was a really low ceiling. And right away they were like, I can't. No, this is like, I can't play in this is it's too hard. I can't. And I had to be like, listen, you're making up an excuse that's not true. You can play in this, you can do this. But they had these just preconceived ideas that because it was whatever, they couldn't do it, and we were trying to break through that barrier of you can, you just need to. But it was so incredibly hard to try and convince these junior high girls that they could do it. And I started thinking, what has been happening in your life to make you think that you can't do this little thing? It was really interesting. Of course, I'm not a psychologist or anything, but I remember kind of walking away from the game really frustrated, like, why could I not convince these girls that they could step past this issue, which is what you obviously are doing for people is helping them figure that out. But I was thinking later on in life, how is this going to happen? Right now they're 14, 13, 14 going, I just can't do it. So as a coach, it's really my goal to help them see that they could do it and they could move forward. But now as I look at that, I think to myself, so when they get older, what is that young junior high girl going to be telling the older version of herself? And I just think it's the work you do is so important. We have these hangups we got to get past. And a lot of times we may need someone like you to help us figure that out, figure out the why and peel back the onion. And I absolutely love that. And I want to talk a little bit more about your books as well, because I know you have several books with workbooks that are very helpful. And so, and you have several, which I know we don't have time to talk about every single one, but is there one in particular that you'd love to point out that you think would be great?
Yes, and can before we do that, I want to make a point about the junior high girls. One of the things that I'm working with my clients on all the time is, um, when they say I can't do this or I'm afraid to do this, I change the language to it's just not familiar. So our brains like what's familiar and comfortable and safe. So it's actually really normal for them to be like afraid or I can't, because each of us have this negativity bias that's inside of us that, that's why it kind of spins out of control with each of us. That's kind of our part of our survival mechanism. So one of the things you can tell the girls is, it's just not familiar to you. It's you've never done this before. How about we suspend disbelief and just give it a try? What if we could do it? Let's
Mm,
just practice and see. And a lot of the times when I'm working with people, it's just practice, practice into it versus thinking that they have to master it ahead of time. So when
mm,
I use, especially with adults, it's just unfamiliar. It seems to calm their nervous system, because what we want to do is make the unfamiliar now into the familiar, and
mm.
vice versa. The patterns of keeping them safe in the familiar patterns where they hold themselves back, less familiar from them having a testing or like an experimenting persona. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And we're definitely going to try that because, well, one, I have to say, working with junior high girls has probably been the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah.
That's including like labor, everything. They're a whole different ball of wax. And I love them. But at the same time, I'm like, was I like this in junior high? I always am like, we make a joke. I'm always like, Jesus, take the wheel. All right, here we go. So I love
Yeah.
that. So thank you for sharing that. And yeah, so what are some books that you could recommend for us? I know
So
they're all great. They've been best selling, award winning. So for those of our listeners who might be out here, what are some the ones you recommend?
Well, um, one of my favorites is one that came out just a couple of years ago, which is the Conscious Luck Workbook that I had the pleasure and honor of writing with Gay Hendricks and Carol Klein.
Mm,
And that was based on their book, Conscious Luck. And it's a wonderful, like I couldn't put the book down. It was just so fascinating to me, and every chapter as I had to put it down to go buy another copy for one of my clients.
mhm,
And so I reached out to Gay Hendricks, who I happened to know, and we talked about, okay, well, what would it look like um, to write a workbook that goes with that? And I have journals, the Wealth Transformation Journal, the Successful Life Transformation Journal as well. And then the book that really tells my story is Increase Your Abundance Starting Today. But probably Conscious Luck is my favorite. And then I have another, the Conscious Luck Workbook is my favorite. I have another book coming out very soon.
awesome. Well, we definitely want to hear about that when that happens. You need to tag us, send it
I
to us, we'll
will.
promote it out. Well, I typically ask our clients towards the end of our podcast, one, you just mentioned you have another book coming out. Is there anything else going on that you want our listeners to know about or where you want them to go to get more of what you're doing?
Yes, and the next book that's coming out is also co-authored. It's called Wealth Creation for Coaches, a workbook for creating a thriving and sustainable practice as a prosperous coach, one step at a time. And it's with Steve Chandler, who is known as the godfather of coaching. And so I'm really excited about that book. It comes out soon. And one of the things that I did put together, and this is for your listeners, if they go to either my website, but which is KarimSamuel.com, but they can also go to wealthflightschool.com. And I have a plethora, a whole repository of articles and PDFs of some of the books and recordings there, just to help. I really have a heart to help people on their financial journey to realize it's just money.
Mm.
It's just when I realized on the other side of all of my financial woes that it's just money, I began to thrive in a different way and see it and realize that I could design it and create differently and create the life that I wanted to live. And so I highly recommend just going to wealthflightschool.com. It says $28, and then when you go there it just says free, and just sign up. I don't send a lot of emails. That might change with the book coming out. But
Mhm.
it's really designed for people of any background, um, that is wanting to get out of debt, or they might even be making a lot of money and still have money fears
Mm.
and want to go to the next level for themselves.
I love that, and it says in here, obviously, you're into helping people, and, gosh, money. You said something, and I actually heard it, I was in Nashville doing a masterclass training, and the person there said, "If you're focused on revenue, you're not gonna get anywhere. You should be focusing on the assets and what's behind that." And how powerful is that to say, when you just said, "It's just money," right? Just I mean, that's so powerful to me to take the stress of that word money and change it. So I love that. So I hope those of you guys are listening. I mean, I'm all about free stuff. So if you guys go there and check that out, we'll put the links on it. And if you could give a tip or two to our listeners, who may be entrepreneurs attempting to move forward, maybe they've had a failure or a bankruptcy, and they're really trying to figure out, like, what's the next step? What are some tips that you could give them?
Oh, that's wonderful, because the first thing I would say is anybody who's experienced failure gives you a little bit of credibility. I didn't know that initially, and I remember having a conversation with a venture capitalist, and he was kind of, we were having a nice conversation, but it wasn't until I said that I had a bankruptcy, and he was like, "Oh," and it was almost like it it gave me the credibility to have a different level of conversation because I was battle tested.
Mm,
And so we have survived so much. And so if we use that as a launching pad, one of the things that I put in my latest book is about mistakes. Mistakes, put a hyphen in that. It's a miss hyphen take. It's like in the film industry. Let's just do it again. Like, the ability for us to realize, oh, I just found another way, like Thomas Edison, another way that didn't work. That's
mm,
okay. Because I came from a family where it wasn't okay to make mistakes. And
mm,
we were supposed to do it right and do it right the first time. And so, and then I've heard you tell the Sarah Blakely story too.
mhm.
Like, her dad was like, "Yeah, what mistakes did you make today?" I was like, "What? That's
Yeah.
not how it went in my family." And so the ability for people to realize, like, "Oh, I just found one way. I had a mistake with the business that I started." It almost stopped me again from going into business. I was like, "Wait, that business didn't fit who I am."
Mm,
So part of this is also for people to look for, where are they aligned with who they are, their energies, their strengths. I work with a lot of people on strengths,
mm,
and coming from their strengths as superpowers, and focusing on that. And I think the third thing I would say is, from that alignment and from your strengths, create again.
mm. Yeah.
And keep in mind what I said earlier. If fear is showing up, if resistance is showing up in any way, a great book is The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield.
Mm,
Is If resistance is showing up, just say, "Oh, that's just not familiar to me.
mm.
I can learn the skill to get through that." And if we treat life like, "Oh, this is a new experiment, this is a new test," we can go so much farther.
Wow. I love that. I mean, those such great tips and such a great way to end on this. And hold on, Dr. Kamin Samuel. I'm getting it right, girl. I'm never gonna get it wrong again. I'm never gonna get it wrong again. I'm so excited. And so for those of you guys listening, what you're preaching is, gosh, I wish I had this 15 years ago.
Me too.
The lack of mentorship and the lack of this and the path I had to take to kind of figure it all out, I feel like I could have been 15 years ahead. So if you guys are thinking about any of this, obviously we'll post the link again. Make sure you go check out the website, the books that are going on. I love all this. And of course, if you're driving and listening right now, don't worry. We'll post all the links so you can go back in and get those. But it was such an honor today to speak with you. Like I have goosebumps because this is such good advice. And I love this. And I'm super excited too for those of you guys listening. We're going to write an article as well in some of our magazines that I write columns in. So we'll dive even deeper into that. And I don't know, we might get a few snippets of you and Vernice on the same Zoom together,
Oh, I'm so
which is going to be
excited.
super fun. So you guys be ready for a lot of great stuff coming out from everyone in this. So thank you so much for being on the show. And as I always say, live, love, laugh, and always be your authentic self.